took the cubby and cut it out, and actually this is where the factory GPS goes on later models, so Subaru has a pretty good space back behind this cubby for LCD screen to fit, and it's pretty easy to fit that in. So here's what it is.
They feel alone, according to research by healthcare provider Cigna, and the holidays can exist.
So, pretty simple. This is an Android unit. It's only about, I don't know, 2 inches deep, and it fits in the space where the cubby used to be. This has two aux in and a video in for the backup camera. It'll play, and what I did is an 05 Outback, but I put in an 07 head unit, so I have an aux input, and the output from the Android goes to the aux in the head unit, so it's really simple. If I want to listen to anything from this guy, I just turn this to aux. This guy has a radio, and it has nav, so whatever you can get off of Android you can get with this guy, and you can download a bunch of different apps, right? So this is actually an offline maps.me, and it's pretty decent. The GPS antenna is a double-sided tape just to the bottom of the cubby. It seems to get pretty decent reception. It sometimes loses where the car is, so it might be better if I set it up on top of the dash for more accuracy. But there's the offline maps. And then this also has music, so it has, actually I said it had two inputs. It has two RCA inputs, but it also has two USB inputs. So in the console, I have it hooked up to my iPod connector. So I'm powering it through USB, and I have a little jack, it's 3.5 millimeter jack input, and then I also have MP3 off of the second USB. So it plays music, it'll play iPod, it's got Bluetooth, it does Hey Google, so I can do voice commands. Pretty nice and cheap system. I think this was like $45 or something like that. And then the backup camera, it just automatically shows what's behind you when I put it in reverse, and I'll go through the details of how I installed everything. To install, my motivation was to avoid splicing any wires. I actually only had to splice one wire to get this entire installation done, and that was the reverse lamp positive 12 volt side at the tailgate. Everything else is just plug-in. So what I did is I got a wiring harness off of eBay that sits in between the head unit and the body harness, and it's just a female to male connector that's just, straight wires all the way across. But using that interface, I spliced off the 12 volts, the ignition, the dimmer switch, the ground, I'm not sure if there was anything else, and pulled it from that harness into the Android unit. And then I also had to, Subaru has this funky antenna wire into their head units. It's like a 2-pin connector. It's not the normal round antenna unit. So to do that, I did another harness that was female to male interfaced with that Subaru connector and ran that to a standard antenna, the round plug antenna coaxial thing, and that ran that into the head unit. So this guy is getting antenna or radio signals as well, so I can play the radio through this. I can still play the radio through the head unit, but when I'm doing that, obviously I don't get any of the sounds from like the GPS or anything else coming out of the head unit when I do that. The other thing I did is this guy again has aux input and aux output. So its aux output is RCA, so I did just a cable that ran the RCA connector into 3.5-inch headphone jack, ran the output from this to the aux input to this guy, so that's how this guy is getting sound from this guy, and then the input on this guy, there's RCA and USB. There's 2 USB inputs on this. So the 2 USB inputs, I ran the wires into the cubby. So I have one USB that I'm using to read MP3s. The other USB I'm using to power an iPod connector, because I still have an old school iPod. And then I also have, it's kind of dark, but there's a 3.5-inch RCA jack in here. I also still have the cigarette lighter power. There's an RCA jack in here. Not RCA, a headphone plug. This 3.5-inch headphone plug goes to the RCA input in the Android head unit. So basically, or the Android unit. So basically what I'm doing is powering the iPod from this USB, but the sound signals are running into the headphone jack, and that's just an aux. Basically, if I turn aux on here, I can listen to my iPod directly, because this guy does not have an old school iPod interface. And then, again, the second USB I'm using for MP3. And those MP3s, this guy reads directly. The other thing this guy can do is he does mirroring. So you can, if you have a newer iPod or iPhone or any Android phone, this will mirror that. It'll mirror it either through one of those USB connectors, or you can do it through Bluetooth. So this, I mentioned before, this also has Bluetooth. This will do phone and music through Bluetooth. And then the wire. So wiring wise, that's how this interfaces with the head unit and those inputs. The only other wiring part is the backup camera. So the backup camera, what I did is I'll show in the back, but I'm running just that single RCA video from the rear lift gate. All I did is I ran it along the edges, or the space between panels and the roof, all the way along the car, ran it under the dashboard, and then into the cubby space. Installation of the Android unit, actually you can see I cracked the cubby, unfortunately, or the panel, unfortunately. I'm going to replace that. Cutting out the cubby is pretty easy. Just cut it out. I used a Dremel to kind of clear out the area all around. I'm going to clean this up a little bit. This is a piece of plastic that's just double-sided tape to the top of the Android unit, because there is a gap there. So I'm going to clean that up a little bit. And then you can kind of see on this side I added a black plastic piece along the side to close that off. I'll do the same thing on this side. So on the lift gate, there's the camera. The camera sits here, that you can still get to the lift gate. I'm running the cable from the camera right next to the lift gate. You actually, the easiest way, or the way I decided to do this is a plastic panel that just screws to the lift gate, to the sheet metal of the lift gate. So I remove this plastic panel. With that comes the reverse lamps. One word before I move on. To remove this plastic panel, it screws. It does not clip in. So if you're getting resistance on pulling this off, don't pull harder, you just have some more screws to remove. There's a number of screws holding this to the liftgate, and then there are 4 hidden nuts that sit underneath this panel. So you remove this panel clips in. There's one of those plastic rivets under here, and then you pop this off. There's 2 nuts that hold this panel down. The reverse lights are actually attached to this panel, so when you pull the panel off, the reverse light should come out. So make sure you have the cable disconnected from the reverse lights before you try and pull that panel off. I actually broke most of the connections from this panel to the liftgate, so I'm going to replace it so it's right, but I still have it all sealed off. Okay, so with that note, this cable actually runs, I didn't want to drill any new holes in the liftgate, so this cable runs underneath the plastic panel and in between the actual liftgate sheet metal and the gasket that is sealing the reverse light to the liftgate panel. You can't just press this against the body or the liftgate with the cable running through it and have it seal. So I actually have RTV between the seal for the reverse light and the cable. I've tested it, it seals, and everything seems to fit together okay. But you don't want to allow any openings between this panel and the metal of the liftgate, because water will get in and it'll completely rust out the liftgate. So make sure to make sure everything seals. The other note on that is all of the bolts that actually hold the panel to the liftgate have a rubber gasket on them. So when you tighten the bolts, it pulls the head of the bolt, or it's kind of the back end of the head of the bolt, and seals against the metal liftgate. So anyway, the point is, whatever you do to run that cable for the reverse camera into the inside of the car, make sure that you're sealing against water, because water inside the liftgate will just rust it. Okay. So once you get the wire in through the reverse light hole, it's really simple. So basically, this panel comes off. There's 2 screws underneath the handle, and then the panel basically, well, first you have to remove these panels. They are just clipped in, so they pop off. Pull them this way, pull this one this way. Then this rear panel can be pulled off, and that pulls out this way. And then this guy, there's 2 screws underneath this little cover. Take those out, and then this guy pops off as well. There are other YouTube videos on how to do that, so I won't show a lot of detail on that. But once you do that, you splice into the 12 volt for the reverse light to get the 12 volt signal, which signals the head unit to pay attention to the camera in the back, and it powers the camera in the back. And then the cable that runs video and that 12 volt signal just runs along the pillar here through this sealed section, and then this actually just pops off as well. So you don't have to pull much of this down. You can get this cable through, and then you just route it to the front of the car.